daughter or spouse of someone that's very ill.
Yes.
It sure is.
Is
Or-
Wanda Wells getting better or not? Is it her heart or
No, she has an immune disorder.
really?
It's very rare. So rare that the doctor that diagnosed it almost missed it. He'd only seen it twice in his career.
Really?
Both of them in the last 6 months. Both of them at Georgetown Hospital. Both of them from people who had COVID over the winter.
Are you kidding? Well,
I don't know if
saw
that's
where
a
it
direct
said-
correlation, but they all.
I saw
Pretty
where it
good
said
coincidence.
immune, but I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
Because she's in the CCU, which
Right.
is coronary care.
Right. Which is really weird that they have her in there. I think it's just because the other units are full.
Oh.
It's the only thing I can figure. And it's St. Joe. They do weird things there. They just put you all over the place. So I don't know.
They do weirder things in UK.
So is there treatment for the immune disorder or?
Chemotherapy, actually, it's what.
Infusion.
Yeah. And so they're doing that, and they're also doing dialysis because as part of it, her kidneys have shut down a good bit. But they've seen a kind of a resurge in her kidneys,
Good.
and so
That's good.
they're not sure if she'll have to remain on dialysis or not, but it's a possibility.
Well, I'm sure Glenda's on top of it.
Yes.
Both feet.
Yes, yes, yes. Tina, could you do me a favor? Could you close the back door? I meant to do that when I was back there. I just know the kids are probably gonna be running around before we're done. They'll get crazy loud on us. All right, I think we're ready to jump into Mark 5 and see what all's going on there. All right, everybody, you read up, you studied up, you ready to figure out? Let me pray for us as we begin. Father, we love you. We thank you that we can gather together and learn from your word. Help us as we dig into your word to hear your heart and your mind and your message to us. And help us not just to hear it, but help us to apply it to our life and live it. Thank you for all that we can do to learn more from you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, so Mark chapter 5. We're going to jump into a few things. There's a few things that, I tell you what, let me do the overview first. We'll do that, and then we'll get into the reading. Because there's 3 stories in this chapter that are connected. They may not sound like they're connected, but there's some connectivity between them. The first story is the man who's demon possessed. We're somewhat familiar with that. It's actually in all the Synoptic Gospels. In fact, all 3 of these are in all 3 Synoptic Gospels. And so we will cover all 3 of those. And as Joyce comes in, she'll be financially securing that for us and taking care of it. So that we, thanks, Joyce. See, it's what happens when you're late. You now have to pay for everything. We're having dessert delivered.
Awesome, I like dessert.
All right, it's on you. So, no, I'm kidding. And so you have the three stories that are in there. The demon possessed man, the woman with the suffering of blood, the issue of blood that all 3 talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about how they parse them out a little bit, and then also the dead girl being restored to life. As I said, all 3 of these stories are found in all 3 Synoptic Gospels, so Matthew, Mark, and Luke all have them in there, but there are some differences between them, okay? In the story of the man possessed by demons, in Matthew, there are 2 men, not 1. That's the only difference. I don't think it changes the point of the story. I don't think it changes the story any. I just think it's interesting that Matthew can't count. So maybe he had double vision.
Tax collector who can't count.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you had double. Well, you know, tax collectors, they like to add a little extra, right? So maybe that's what he did. You know, being a tax collector, he might have. But in Mark and Luke, there's a focus on 1 man, and in Mark, there's a detailed description, a dramatic event. I mean, it's not just a real quick story; it's a longer story, and so he really gets into it quite a bit. You have the cutting, the change, the being a legion, and then his mission to Decapolis. Luke's account is very much like Mark's, but it's extremely shorter. Luke's doesn't get into all the detail. There's some great theological significances in all 3 of these stories. In this one especially, there's the restoration and the witness of what happens. That the man now becomes a missionary going into the world to go tell. In fact, as we get into this, we'll find that he was the first person in Mark that Jesus said, go and tell. Everyone else he said, don't say anything, even though they did. In Matthew, there's an emphasis between a confrontation between Jesus and the demonic powers. You don't read that as much of a confrontation in Mark and in Luke, but in Matthew you do. In Mark and Luke, they kind of highlight the idea of healing and regeneration and reintegration back into society. So there's kind of a restoration kind of time. The second story, verses 25 through 34, you find the woman with an issue of blood. As I said, they're also found in Matthew and Luke. Matthew's version is extremely short again. In fact, it's only 3 verses. It's Matthew chapter 9, verse 20 through 22. 3 quick verses and the story's done. In Mark and Luke, both mention that the woman had been suffering for 12 years. The others did not, and that she had lost her money, and that she was, and the secretive touch were both mentioned in those. Not so much in Luke. It's interesting, they say that Luke avoids the idea of her saying that she'd spent all her money. You know why?
Doctor.
He's a doctor. He doesn't want to rat out the other doctors and say, they've been collecting money for nothing. It's the Humana healthcare system all over again, right?
After 12 years, she spent all her money and she was worse off.
Yeah, she was no better than what she was to begin with. Mark's account is actually the most emotionally and theologically rich version. I love that this is the place in the scripture where Jesus calls her daughter. In fact, this is the only place in scripture where Jesus calls any woman daughter. Very significant. Restoring her back to her sense of self and worth and community. So it's really huge. In Mark and Luke, Jesus shows his awareness of personal suffering. He gets it. He gets her suffering and what all she has to go through because of that suffering. In Matthew, the focus is really on faith as the reason for healing, that it was her faith that healed her. And then you get into Jairus' daughter, the girl who had died, and Jesus rose from the dead. Again, they're both found in Matthew and Luke as well. And Matthew, again, abbreviates the stories. Matthew's your quick teller. He's the Reader's Digest abridged version of everybody's story, I guess. And it's significant. And in fact, in his version, when Jesus is first encountered with this, the daughter's already dead. In the other 2 accounts, she's sick, and on his way she died. So there's a little bit of difference. Mark and Luke give a full narrative, including the interruption of the woman. So you have the kind of the sandwich story. Remember we talked about that? Mark sometimes does that. He has a sandwich story where something happens in between, and that's just one of those situations where that does happen. Mark and Luke, they give the detail of Jesus speaking in, I guess it's Arabic, or Aramaic, I'm sorry, as opposed to just reading in English. Matthew doesn't give that account. And Luke had a strong emotional response from the parents and from the crowd of the daughter being raised. Some great theological significances here. Mark emphasizes Jesus' power and tender authority, the importance of faith in the face of fear. Matthew focuses on power over death, and Luke adds a detail to the emotional impact and the dynamic of faith in it. So, with that being said, let's read the first story. How's that? And I'm going to be honest with you, we're going to be hard pressed to get through this whole story today, but we're going to do our best to get at least 2 of these stories done, okay? So the first one, starting with verse 1. So they arrived at the other side of the lake. Remember, as we closed out chapter 4, they were going across the lake, the storm rose up, Jesus stands up and says, "Be still." And the storm goes away, and now they've gotten to the other side. So it's a continuation. It happened right after what we read last week. In the region of the Gerasenes, and we're going to talk just for a moment about that. When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. Some vivid imagery there, right? When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him. With a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send him to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered into the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned into the water. And they had a large barbecue. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That wasn't in. I don't think that's in your version.
I didn't read that.
They had a large barbecue.
He's embellishing it.
Just a small embellishment there. Good thing I had that chicken to eat before we came in here, right? The herdsmen fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. He was sitting there, fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. Then those who had seen what had happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with them. But Jesus said, "No, go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been." So the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed at what he told them. Interesting story. What do you hear? What are some things that you hear in that?
Well, the Jews hated even touching a pig, let alone
Yeah.
eating a pig.
Yeah.
And they were in Gentile country,
Mm-hmm.
and which the Jews hated also. And it probably affected the Gentiles' income with 2,000 pigs
Yeah.
in the ocean.
Yeah. I think that's why they chased them off, right? When Jesus get out of there. You nailed it, the first two. This story is not just a story about Jesus being able to cast out the demons. Now, you mentioned one, they were in a Gentile area. Come on, computer, keep up with me. There we go. They had traveled across the Sea of Galilee. I wanted to show you the entire scope of Israel during those times. This is the Sea of Galilee. It's about 100 miles north and south and about 20 miles across. No, 8 and 40. Thank you.
Is it fed by the big ocean or just
It is actually not ocean water, it's fresh water.
freshwater?
It is a freshwater lake. It's the only freshwater lake in Israel. And it's also very low in sea level. It's like 600 some feet below sea level. It is one of the lowest freshwater lakes in the world.
Really?
Yeah, so it's fresh water. And so Jesus had been ministering on this side, and they traveled across the Sea of Galilee to this side. And this side is Gentile land. And so in this story, you've got multiple times where Jesus is going to what the Jews would consider to be an unclean, something unclean.
Mm-hmm.
One, he's going across to the Gentiles. Two, he is encountering somebody with demons. Demons are unclean. And three, he cast them into pigs, which are unclean animals for them. And so Jesus does a multitude of things here with unclean that we have to kind of unpack and kind of figure out what exactly he's going to talk about. Or what? I don't know, scroll down.
One of the other things that amazed me out of this is the man was demon possessed, but the demons recognized Jesus who he was.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
And I love that Mark points that out, because what's the significance of that? How did they interact with Jesus? What did they say to Jesus?
I think they were a little bit afraid of him.
Yeah,
They didn't want to be cast back into hell.
Yeah.
Or,
They recognized his authority and his power.
Exactly.
You nailed it, Richard. What do you call him? What did the demons call Jesus?
Son of the Most High God.
They knew right. It's interesting. Now think about this. Had Jesus declared that he was the Messiah yet?
no.
It didn't happen until later.
Think about that for a second. The first instance of Jesus being proclaimed as who he was done in Mark, at least, by demons.
That's something.
Now, if you talk about levels of uncleanness, okay, I think the Jews would have been okay if a Gentile, right? They probably would have been okay with Jesus being near pigs. They definitely would not be okay with a demon acknowledging who Jesus was.
No, but not away.
I mean, that's like the depth of bad, right? Of the unclean. And yet they begged Jesus, my version said. They begged Jesus over and over, do not throw us into a distant land. Don't cast us off to a distant land. Instead, and I couldn't find anybody who would give me a clear answer on this. I was trying to figure out what anybody would suppose. Why would Jesus be compliant to the demons and not just cast them far away and cast them into the pigs? Other than the fact that maybe if he cast them far away, there was no evidence of them. But when he cast them into the pigs and they rush into the water and they drown, now there's evidence of what happened.
All of that.
Another significant event.
All
So
the
did the
Gentiles.
demons drown?
Yeah.
Their spirits?
Yeah, I would-
Did the
yeah.
demon, I mean.
It leaves us hang with that.
Leave us hang.
Yeah.
Leaves us hang with that.
It went convincing evidence that he had done something like that.
Yeah.
To anybody.
Yeah.
For the Gentiles. For the Gentiles.
And then for the Gentiles, you know, there's a few things here. Let's talk about the context of what Jesus is doing here. He's across the Sea of Galilee, which is, like I said, the largest freshwater lake. It's small by our standards, but it's large enough to stir up some dangerous waters, as we saw in the end of chapter 4. Winds come in. It's also down in a valley, and so it's surrounded by hills and mountains, and so winds can project down and get stronger as they do, and really create the storm that we saw in chapter 4. And then the region is a huge Gentile area, and it's very unclean. Gentiles would not travel, or Jews, would not travel to this area. If they did, they had to go through a ritual cleansing in order to be able to worship again, because they've gone into unclean land with unclean people, because they're Gentile. Now,
But it was still a part of Israel.
still apart.
Okay.
Yes. The other interesting thing is, if you notice, here's where Jerusalem is. So here is the seat of the Jews' religious center, right? But here is where Nazareth is, and Cana is up here, Capernaum's up here. You've got a lot of Jewish holds here. But if they traveled, this area here is all Samaria. They would not travel through Samaria because they were half-breeds, right? And so they would travel across the Jordan, come down, and then come back. They would go out of their way. And so they would travel just a tip of this, but other than that, they would never come into this area. They try to stay away from it as much as possible because of their religious faith. They felt the area was unclean, was not congruent for them to be able to do that and to be able to worship. And so, further context. You have the 10 towns, the region that I just showed you. There are 10 towns that are in that area. Most of them we've not heard of much. The ones that you probably would have heard of would have been Gerasera, Philadelphia, and Damascus. We don't hear about him so much in the Gospels. We hear about him more in Paul's writing because that's the area that he did his mission trips in. Okay, so these are areas that became known to believers, to the Christian church, but not to the Jewish church. They stayed away from that area as much as possible. There's a heavy Greek influence in that area. A lot of Hellenistic culture. It was kind of a weird political thing. It was not under Roman rule as authority, but it was under Roman protection. So it wasn't a Roman occupied area, but if they needed help, they could get on the phone and call Rome and they could help. Probably not a phone, but they sent a pigeon, whatever they had to do. Religiously, it was incredibly pagan. There were a lot of Hellenistic gods, Greco-Roman gods, a lot of temples, imperial cults, and it was very Gentile. It was very anti-Jewish. It was very anti-God in a lot of its ways. Why does Mark mention the 10 towns? Part of the 10 towns idea is that he knew that this area was an area that Jesus sent him back to evangelize. As I said earlier, this is the first person that Jesus said, go and tell. Tell your story. Go back to your family. He reinstated him, restored him back to who he was prior to the demons. And it's just kind of an interesting place for him to be. So, let me see, where else? Also in this story, some other significant things that I found. The man came to Jesus. Jesus saw him, but the man ran to meet him. Why in the world would demons who know who Jesus is, why would they run out to Jesus?
To tell him not to bother him.
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's what they first said to him. Don't
Yeah.
leave us alone.
Yeah, leave us alone.
Yeah.
Think of the condition of the man.
Yeah.
And not so much in Mark's account, but in the other accounts, they don't mention that he's been out there so long and he's naked.
Oh,
And so a lot of modern commentators kind of say that he was probably had a mental illness, had some kind of, they try to do away with the demon possession side and try and justify it into today. I personally think if Mark says they were demon possessed, I'm going to trust they were demon possessed.
I'm gonna go with that
The
one.
pigs are a testament to that.
Yeah, exactly.
and we have demon-possessed people now.
And I think that's part of the problem. Not that we have demon-possessed people now, but we don't acknowledge that we do. We try to pretend that we don't, and that they don't exist, and so it didn't exist then. They just didn't have a better way to explain it, and so now we're smarter. So now we can explain it, and sometimes I don't think we're as smart as we wish we were.
It was very prevalent in his ministry
Yes.
to cast demons out, and he says that we would do that,
Yes.
to his disciples and everything even more.
Exactly.
So we would be quite remiss if we did not acknowledge that still goes on. I mean,
Yeah.
it has to, because it says the things of the spirit are more real than the things that we can see.
And we really, and I don't know, I'm guilty of this myself. The spiritual realm, we don't deal with a lot. We deal with more practice today, and I think we do that at our own detriment sometimes. I confess that myself. In verse 9, Jesus asks, "What is your name?" And their word, they said, "Legion." When you hear the word legion, what do you think of?
Roman legions.
Or many,
10,000? Is that 10,000?
something of
In the Roman
the
army.
ability to conquer.
The legion that they talk about, I'm trying to find my notes here, is about 6,000 is what they count as a Roman legion of troops, or 6,000 soldiers that are gathered together. And so when he says we are legion, the hearer automatically kind of sees the idea of a Roman infantry army of 6,000 soldiers, all in one person. To me, that says there's a lot of oppression and chaos and just a lot of bad. I mean, how do you deal with having? I mean, prior to going to Kansas City in seminary, I worked two realms. I was a part-time youth pastor in a church, and I was full-time as a social worker with our children's services department in Licking County, Ohio. My main job in that was investigating child abuse and neglect, which was not a fun job. I remember one case where we had one lady that was on my caseload that I was investigating. She was schizophrenic. She was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. And she is probably the closest to this that I've ever seen,
Really?
where she heard voices in her head. And she replied to them, and she spoke in different language. I think she had a little bit of multiple personality going on. And that kind of thing is just, there's just a dark feeling around that. I mean, it's just, if you've never been around it, don't go look for it, okay? If you've ever been around it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is, it's just scary.
Did you go in their house?
Oh, I was in her house many times.
That's where you found it.
Yeah, it's,
Well, whenever you think of they're cut themselves with sharp stones, you know, and that gives you an inference there of him being out of control.
yeah,
And under their power.
completely out of control, completely under their power, completely trying to figure out, my heart goes out to this poor guy. There's nothing that says he did anything to bring this on himself. There's nothing that says that he was a cause of this. It was just, he shows up, and this is what it is. And so then the spirits begged him again and again not to send them into a distant place. And so then they requested of Jesus to send them into the pigs. Now,
And Jesus gave them permission, it said.
yeah, and so Jesus did that, gave him permission to go. Now you got to remember, Mark's writing to Gentiles. He's not writing to Jews. And so I don't think he has to worry about the cleanness, uncleanness of all these different things. But I can imagine that the original hearers that were Jews, when this is just my own weird side, when they heard he's going to cast them into pigs, they're like, yes, get rid of those unclean animals, right? I mean, they might have been happy at this version. But the Gentiles that read it, I think you guys were right. This might have been their livelihood. 2,000
pigs is
pigs.
a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money in this day, let alone in that day, when there weren't a lot of pigs around. They didn't have near the farms.
Yeah, 2,000 pigs in that area at that time was a herd.
That's a herd and a half. I mean, that's 2,000 pigs anywhere is a herd and a half right now. I mean,
And
Yeah,
they smell.
I think that was part of the reason they asked him to get out of there, because it was financial.
Disaster.
yeah, I think it was saving his own skin, kind of thing. It's interesting that the people rushed out to see what had happened. And the crowd gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion. So they were familiar with the guy. As it says, they tried to put shackles around, put chains on him, and he would break them all the time. So this was a common person, but now all of a sudden, they see the man who was demon possessed, sitting there fully clothed, perfectly sane. And they were afraid. Do you find that interesting? This poor guy, who had been, for whoever knows how long, probably years, cast out, been the pariah of the culture, been the one that nobody wanted to be around. Could you imagine being his parents, being his brother, sister, and they're talking about, no, that's your brother, that's your son, that's out there, it's crazy. What'd you do? You're part of this somewhere. And now they come out and they see him perfectly sane, fully dressed. Now, this is the only inference that we have that he wasn't fully dressed before, is that now he is fully dressed, and Mark makes note of it. But now the people are afraid of him.
Are they afraid of the man, or are they afraid of Jesus?
Afraid of the man. They said they're afraid of him.
Why would they be afraid of him is my question.
that's some significant change. I mean, that's
Yeah.
some kind of great power
It's,
change.
Something changed him and changed him.
Yeah.
Well, you would think they would be afraid of Jesus instead of the man.
I would think a little bit more so of Jesus than the man. But if I'm reading this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you might be wrong, they were all afraid.
They were all afraid.
Those who had seen what had happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. So-
and they were afraid.
Yeah.
It doesn't say which one.
From the Greek connotations is that it directs back to the same man, just as the first two parts of that was that he was clothed and sane, and they were afraid, that they were all tied together.
I know,
This is a guy that must have been a really strong demon. The demon possession made him abnormally strong.
Oh, he was
because
breaking chains.
He was able to break chains and crush the shackles.
Yeah.
And so they may have been afraid that the man was still part.
Could he do that again? Still,
Yes.
you know, what's he gonna do now?
Yeah.
I know you said about witnessing something like that. 40-some years ago, when Gene Poole was youth director, one of our teens was just really, I mean, we had him down had him down at the altar. I can't remember the boy or girl who it was, but Gene Poole was just praying real hard, and we were all praying real hard. And then it's just like something flew by us and out the door. And everybody was like, what was that? And then whoever it was like, I feel so much better. And he said, you know, and it was.
Sounds eerily similar.
Right, and it was just amazing. I mean, to actually witness something like that.
I think they were afraid because sometimes when we don't understand, especially the spiritual realm, but even just the power of God itself, and then we witness it, it is so powerful that it can scare us. Because it's far beyond what we could dream or imagine, far beyond what we can conceive, far beyond what we can understand, and it's just more than what we could think of. And here they are seeing this firsthand to somebody they've known for years.
And familiar with him screaming and hollering and all that going on at night.
Yeah, and now he's saying,
In the tombs.
yeah,
Now, whenever they said it, to me, whenever Mark mentions in his right mind or sane, that means that he has come a far piece from unsanitary, unclean, just running amok.
yeah,
Pardon-
literally.
Pardon the expression.
Yeah, no, he was running amok, there's no doubt.
In the tombs.
And then you get into verse 17, and then the crowd begins pleading with Jesus to go away. I think they were a little bit, and I think it goes back to what I just said, they had just witnessed something they cannot explain. And sometimes when we can't witness, or we can't explain something we even that we witnessed, we get afraid of it, and it's better if it just goes away. We don't have to deal with it. We don't have to think about it anymore. And then again, you go back to, okay, it might have been because of the agricultural reason. He just killed off 2,000 head of hogs, and that was their livelihood. At least it was somebody's livelihood, I guarantee you that. And maybe that was part of the reason. And there's a lot of the commentators bringing a lot of different things into that to try and figure out exactly which it is and what it is that they want to get rid of. So you have the pigs, very unclean, something that no Jew would ever touch, and yet Jesus entered into. That's the thing you need to see over and over again here. And again, it's kind of the thing of threes here. You know, Mark likes to talk in threes, right? And illustrate in threes. Jesus went to an unclean area, to an unclean man, and there were unclean pigs. And Jesus entered into the situation. And And so the part of the application that we need to gather from this is Jesus is not afraid to enter into our mess.
Talks about his compassion.
Completely his compassion. Talks about his love and compassion for others go beyond the religious ritual and norms. Exactly. I've said a few times, and some people have said, I probably shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it anyhow. I'm willing to do anything short of sin to win somebody to Christ. And that's what I see Jesus doing here. In fact, he went beyond what the Jews would say is sin. He broke the religious tradition, but for love's sake, for right reason. Then he sends him into as he goes to leave, Jesus complies again. Now, I find this interesting that in this passage, Jesus complies twice. Once to the demons, don't want to cast you into the distant land, I want to cast you in the pigs, I'll give you permission to go to the pigs. And now he's like, okay, you want me to go away? I'll go away. But did he go away?
No.
He didn't. Because the man wanted to go with him. But Jesus said, no. I want you to go home and tell everything that has happened. Tell what the Lord has done for you, basically. And so, he became a great missionary into that area. If you read later in Scripture, when Paul does his mission trips, he encounters Christians in the Decapolis.
Well, didn't Jesus come back later? And
Yes.
they were waiting for him.
And they were waiting for him.
Welcome for old Mark,
Yeah.
Were these the Gentiles?
Yes.
Great.
Yes. And so here you have, technically he's the first evangelist that Jesus commissioned,
Isn't that something?
was a Gentile. So what does that say about
He loves us
Jesus? And yes, that's
all.
exactly
Loves
it.
us all.
He's not limited to a culture, to a class, to a race, to a socioeconomic level, to anything. He will go to the first extreme to enter into our mess to bring us to him. So what does that mean for us? Some theological themes that we have here.
Will you hold that thought for just a
Sure.
second? It says here that they were afraid. Okay, now that's whenever the people had come and witnessed the unclean man sitting in a sand. But after the man had gone and told them all that God had done for them, they were not afraid. They were amazed.
Exactly. Because now it's proof.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those, when it first happens, we're skeptical. When we see somebody, and that's kind of where I was going to head with some of the application of this, when we see somebody who's lived a very unchristian life, and then they become Christian, we're a little put off. We are these people. We really are. We're skeptical. We're kind of afraid. And then after a while, we accept and become amazed. Once it's had some track record, once it's had some time, once there's proof in the pudding, so to say, right? And so they're very much like us. I mean, we hate to say it, but we're not much different. We're really not. Some theological things that happen here. In this passage, you see Jesus' sanctifying grace. He didn't just save the man, he changed the man's life. He transformed him literally from inside out.
Figuratively.
Yeah, completely. Figuratively and actually. He's clothed, he's in his right mind, and he was sent out to witness. This is kind of a foreshadowing of the Great Commission, to go into all the world. Because that's just what Jesus did here, right? He sent him into all the world, the Decapolis. And in that time period, there was no more worldly place than the Decapolis. He was sending him right to the people that needed Christ the most.
10 cities of Gentiles.
Yeah. And from a Wesleyan perspective, you've got, this is a great picture of entire sanctification. That Jesus doesn't just forgive him, but he frees him and fully transforms him. Changes him completely. And then uses him to complete a mission. one of the commentaries noted that this healing, and this is what we have to understand, healing is not just physical, but it's also communal. It didn't just affect the man. It affected his family, and it affected the whole community. In fact, it went beyond the whole community, his personal community, into those 10 towns, which are pretty spread out. And so that means that the word got out and got traveled very well. The townspeople were more afraid of Jesus' power than the man's previous state. Sometimes spiritual power threatens social norms.
Amen, it does.
It does, doesn't it? And so here we have a great example of it, where Jesus' power and his authority scared them so much because of their social norms were threatened. What they were used to was threatened. Change is not easy for anybody. And when you have that kind of dramatic change, it's very difficult to walk through. So, some applications. Oh, wait. What's the next? I'm sorry.
I think in our country, we have Christianity, but in other parts of the world, they see a whole lot more. They have less, they depend upon less, and they depend more upon the Lord
Yeah.
and his provision, and I think they see a whole lot more of this than we do.
I think the first world problems that we face, probably our biggest one is being able to recognize our need for Christ, because we're so self-sufficient.
Yeah.
I mean, when we have first world problems is when, like, my internet went out of the house the other night. How do I operate with that, right? That's a first world problem. And in other countries, their idea of a problem is, what am I eating today?
Yeah.
You know, how do I get food for my kids? Not you know, can I find a job? There are no jobs, right? And so we have first world problems, and because of our own self-sufficiency, one of our biggest first world problems is our lack of a realization of our need for Christ. We don't. What do we need Christ for? I hear that from a lot of people. I was at the hospital last night witnessing to a guy who's in a very dire state, who is an atheist, and he just says, "I don't believe in God. I don't believe in any of that." And I've heard a bit of a story, and I understand a little bit of where he's coming from, of why. He's a war veteran, and he saw some of the worst of the worst. He was one of 7 coroners in the world for Vietnam from the U.S. side of the war, and so there were only 7 coroners, and he was one of them. And so he's got a very tainted view, very skeptical view of the world and of God, and yet at the same time, it's a mission field. And it's hard for him to grasp some of that, and it's hard for him to really grab a hold of, what does this mean for me? But yet, in our own world, he's like, why do I need God? I've got everything I need. I've had everything I've ever needed. I don't need a God. When I die, I'm just going to close my eyes and everything goes on, and I just quit. You know, that's his mentality. And so sometimes in our first world that we live in, our lack of our acknowledgement of the need of God is our biggest need that we have. Biggest need we have. Another application. Jesus crossed boundaries to restore the most broken. Are we willing to do the same thing? I mean, think about it. Jesus crossed the Sea of Galilee in the storm, calmed it later, but in the storm. He also went into an unclean area to an unclean person and was around unclean animals. Are we willing to engage into people's uncleanness?
What did his disciples think?
Yeah. I mean, they're all Jews. You know, this is messing with them big time.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What did they think was going on?
Yes. I mean, I'm sure they're going, oh, I hope Mom and Dad don't find out about this. You know, I mean, hope that high priest doesn't know that we're over here doing this with this guy and these animals. We're done, right? But are we willing to enter into people's mess, into the worst of the worst places, into the places that most people would say you shouldn't go there in order to win somebody for Christ? What did Paul say? I've become all things to all men to save some, right? Are we willing to do that? I think that's what Jesus just exemplified here. He's willing to go to the furthest lengths and limits. There are none for him. Transformation by Christ includes a restored mind, a restored purpose, and a restored community. Sanctification is not sanctification unless it affects the community that you live in. Whether that's your house, whether that's your street, your workplace, it's got to have an effect. That's one thing John Wesley said, is that the biggest part of sanctification is the social aspect of sanctification. Did you know, and this is why I'm so bummed about not being able to go to Cuba. I've said it a couple times. I think I'm destined to not go, Chuck. I'm just, three strikes and I'm out. I was going to go later this month, but the ticket would have been $1,200.
You already got two of them.
And I'm like, no, that's my third. I had October. I had a plane go down, go out of service on me, and now this trip for $1,200. I'm like, that's three. I don't know if I'm destined to go. But in Cuba, Cuba is we're talking a communist nation, right?
Yes.
We're talking a place that kicked everybody out in the late 50s. They are requesting the Church of the Nazarene to come and build churches.
Amazing.
You know why?
Yes.
Because of the communal aspect. In the areas around, in the blocks around those churches, the crime rate is down, the prostitution rate is down, and the drug use is down. They're seeing a communal effect. Are we seeing a communal effect of our sanctification in our first world? Sometimes I think no. Not as much as I'd like to see, at least. And finally, fear of change or cost can keep people from embracing God's work. Sometimes, in order for God to work, we have to change. And if there's one thing that we resist the most, is change. But the only constant thing that happens? Change. We're kind of our own catch-22.
But we've got to be willing to change.
Yeah.
That's what it means.
That's exactly it. And the question is, are we willing to change? All right, let's go into the next section. Verses 21 through 34. Would somebody like to read that for us?
I will.
Okay.
Now when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered up to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live. So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him.
You're not done yet, are you?
Yes, it goes into the woman with the issue healed.
Mm-hmm. Keep going, all the way.
I thought you wanted
To 34.
Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years, and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. Immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus immediately, knowing in himself the power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, Who touched my clothes? But his disciples said to him, You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, Who touched me? And he looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction.
While he was still speaking to her, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus. the leader of the synagogue. They told him, "Your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now." But Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just have faith." Then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing. He went inside and asked, "Why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead. She is only asleep." The crowd laughed at him, but he made them all leave. He took the girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples into the room where the girl was lying. He, holding her hand, he said to her, "Talitha koum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And the girl, who was 12 years old, immediately stood up and walked around. They were overwhelmed and totally amazed. Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell anyone what had just happened, and then he told them to give her something to eat. So, sandwich story. Story, then another story. Finishing, right? Beginning, new story, then closing. When you read the first part of the first story, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you think? Jesus going back to the other side of to the Jewish side of the Lake of Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, and now he's with a large crowd that showed up waiting on him, which tells you something right there. He's got a following. People know where Jesus is, and they want to be wherever Jesus is. And so they're showing up, and there's a large crowd. He's going through the town, just walking, and there's a large crowd. And who comes up to him? Significant.
The woman with an affliction.
No. This is
Jairus.
before that.
Jairus.
And who's Jairus?
He's a leader in the synagogue.
Why in the world would the leader of the synagogue come to Jesus? What's he doing?
He was desperate.
Yeah.
His
He's
daughter
a lay leader.
died.
His daughter is dying.
Yeah. He's a leader in the church. He's one of the leaders in the synagogue. And his daughter's dying. And now all of a sudden, all the rules are gone. Right? Desperation has a way of doing things for us, doesn't it? It's amazing what we'll do in a desperate moment.
Sure is.
And especially when it involves one of your children, right? I remember Drew was probably a week old. Maybe 2. I'll go 2 weeks maybe. And I was a youth pastor in Kokomo, Indiana, and I was having a youth staff meeting at our church in one of the rooms, a large room. And Lois was home with Drew and Emily. And she came in, and Drew, she was just in tears. And she's holding Drew, and his head just flopped. And I knew everything was over. He was kind of failure to thrive. I'm like, okay, we've got to go. That's it. I'm sorry. We got to go. You guys carry on your own. And we went to the emergency room. I mean, I ended what I was doing. Everything stops for your kids, right? As you know, he was okay. It was kind of an interesting story. Chuck, he had not been able to urinate. And he was jaundiced, failure to thrive, because he wasn't able to urinate, so he wasn't bringing in anything, right? And so they wanted to weigh him to see how much he had gained or lost since birth. And so they stripped him down naked, poor nurse, stripped him down naked, and they had one of those metal scales to put him in, one of those baby scales, cold as ice. As soon as he hit that, it just shocked his system, and he gave her a bath like she never wanted. It was the most hilarious thing ever. I'll never forget the picture on her face. But it's amazing what Jairus did, because by all accounts, what he did could have made him surrender his position. Could have made him surrender his position. Could have made him surrender his livelihood. The things you will do as a parent for your child. And do you hear the desperation in his voice? There's desperation in his actions, and there's desperation in his voice. That something has to be different. And it's interesting. I'm sure he had already gone to the temple. I'm sure he had already offered prayers. I'm sure he had already even made sacrifice, right? But he came to the one who he saw because he was aware of Jesus. Everybody was aware of Jesus. So he came to the one that he knew had been doing things, had been performing miracles, had been healing people, had been saving people, had been breaking tradition, going outside the bounds and the rules, and now he's going, okay, can you save my daughter? And at this point, he thinks she's just sick, right? It's interesting in some of the other accounts. Which one was it? I think it was Mark or Matthew's. She was already dead before Jairus got to Jesus. In Luke's account, the focus is on the healing process. Mark's account here is more focused on the idea of Jesus' power and authority, and the ability to go outside of the norm to reach folks. And this is what you find actually in all three stories. These three stories are very tightly connected. They have an interconnectivity of uncleanness, of going outside of the bounds, of going beyond where you would go. Jesus comes to a dead person. That's outside of the Jewish tradition. They could not touch a dead person or you're going to be unclean, right? You cannot worship. But it did not stop Jesus. In fact, I think in these three stories you find out nothing's going to stop Jesus from being Jesus. He's going to do what Jesus needs to do when Jesus needs to do it. No questions asked. And Jesus goes to Jairus' house. In this account, he's on his way there. And what's his... Jairus says, please come and lay hands on her, heal her so she can live. You hear the faith? Those were not words of desperation. Those were words of faith. Heal her so she will live.
Lay your hands on her.
Lay your hands on her and she'll be fine. And that's pretty amazing. And so then Jesus is going with them, going through the crowd. And a woman in the crowd, and Mark and Matthew both point out the 12 years. She'd been sick for 12 years, long time. Mark and Matthew also point out she had spent everything she had to get well. She'd done everything that she knew to do to try and get well. And she was not obviously available to. But she had this faith. She did an act of desperation. She's not supposed to be there.
No.
Exactly.
By Jewish law, with her having this, she is unclean.
And she would make Jesus unclean.
She'd make anybody she
Wow.
touched unclean.
And she's supposed to be
isolated.
that she was unclean.
Exactly. She's supposed to call out unclean, so people could stay away from her. And she was breaking the rules. Act of desperation, but also an act of faith.
She recognized his power.
Exactly. She recognized who Jesus was because, one, she was there. She's probably seen and heard of instances of Jesus doing exactly what it is she needs done. And she said, I'm going, and she's tried everything else. I mean, that's what we do, right? We try everything we can. In fact, unfortunately, we're more like her than what we'd like to be.
We exhaust everything else and then turn to Jesus.
And then turn to Jesus. That's exactly it. We do, don't we? I mean, what do you say? Can I do it? Just pray, right?
Well, she didn't have the option of doing anything else.
Other than going to the doctors and spending all her money and all that.
Right,
Yeah.
until she knew Jesus.
Exactly.
And heard about him.
And now she's like, I'm going there.
Yeah.
And so she does. And I like this. For she thought to herself in verse 28, if I can just touch his robe, I'll be healed. She doesn't have to have him do anything. Just his mere presence. Now, odds are, Jesus being a rabbi, I should have brought it in with me. I've got a prayer shawl that I use sometimes when I'm in my private prayer. He had this robe on that had these long strings hanging from it called the tzitzit. And that is where they feel like, on a rabbi, their power comes and goes. And so that, in her mind, that's what she is. Now, remember, Mark's speaking to Gentiles, so he didn't really explain this through, but a Jew would have picked that up immediately. A Jew would have picked up, if she touches the hem of his garment, the corner of his robe, that's where the tzitzit, the little tied and knot strings are. That when she touches that, the power from him would go out. And what did Jesus say?
You touch
Who
me.
touched?
Who touched me? Who touched me? He could feel the power leave from him. And he knew somebody touched. Have you ever been in a big crowd? We've all been in big crowds, right?
Mhm.
And you're elbow to elbow with people walking through a crowd. You don't know who you're touching and who's touching you. And when somebody, I mean, it's a pickpocket's dream, right? Right? Because they can get in there and take anything, and you wouldn't know that it got taken because you're getting bumped around all the time. But Jesus knew. He could feel the power leave him. And so he called out, "Who touched my robe?" And the disciples, in their infinite ignorance, "What are you talking about, Jesus? Did you not see the crowd around you? How do we know who touched you?" We hear this story as a great accomplishment, as a great thing. But I have a feeling that when Jesus asked this question, this woman cowered.
Yeah.
Because in her realm, in her culture, in her world, if she touched a rabbi, he's now unclean, and he could have her stoned. Any man that she touched could have had her stoned to death because she's unclean and she touched them. And so there's part of me that says, when Jesus asked this, I wonder if she cowered back and went, "Oh no, what have I done?"
She said, the woman fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened.
Yeah. And what did Jesus say to her? She's scared. She's scared for her life.
Yeah.
And Jesus' first word to her was, "Daughter." Daughter. Now all of a sudden there's this familial relationship. All of a sudden now she's no longer the woman who's been unclean for 12 years that everybody needs to stay away from, that has done everything she can and can't do anything to save herself. And now she's daughter. Remember how the transformation of a man in the previous story signifies sanctification, transformation? That's exactly what happened here. Jesus transformed her socially, relationally, communally. In front of the crowd said, "Daughter." And I know I'm reading between the lines, I'm interjecting myself into this. I have a feeling Jesus said this loud enough for everyone to hear.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to proclaim her. Put her back in right status in her community. He did not want her to be stuck in the background again. And so Jesus calls daughter, the only time that he uses this word in all the Gospels. And this is a relational restoration, not just a healing. So it's complete transformation. Theologically, this is a great picture of prevenient grace. That God draws near to those who are broken and hidden. Goes after them, seeks them out, is there ready for them. And in Wesleyan theology, we would believe that God even seeks out those who think they are unworthy of his grace.
Sure.
Continually chasing after. Power had gone out. Power, the strength. Jesus' healing is not accidental. It is personal and it's intentional. So how do we apply this to us? I don't know where you're at in your life and your situation, but here's what you need to know from this. Jesus knows your need, and he's not too busy for it. He's always in touch with us. He always knows exactly what we need when we need it. We always want it sooner. Okay? God's timing is always perfect. Never too early, never too late, always right on time. Even in a crowd, he notices the individual. Secondly, God honors bold, humble faith. Her bold, humble move was honored by God, even when it comes from a place of desperation. God's okay with us being desperate for him. He'd rather us be desperate for him than not want him, right? And your story of healing can become now your public testimony of God's power. Because only you can be healed the way you've been healed. And it can become a great witness to somebody else. So it's 7:35, and even though Joyce was a couple minutes late, we're going to stop. We won't make the class, go 15 minutes over because but we're going to come back and finish the first story and jump into chapter 6 next week. Okay? Because we're not done with the first story yet. It's good. Any thoughts? Questions?
Well, I'm not. Whenever you talked about telling what God has done for you,
Mm-hmm.
He saved my life twice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sometimes I feel inhibited to share that with people that are going through something similar because they may not be healed.
They may not be. But is it
But I want them to know that he has,
that he can,
and he
may
can.
not the hope of.
But it
I understand
it
that.
sometimes makes me hesitant.
It's almost like a survivor's guilt
Yeah.
kind of thing. I
Exactly.
get that. Here's the other thing that I say. The man that I saw last night is an atheist. He's read the Bible a few times, doesn't like it, obviously. And he could argue scripture. We could argue scripture back and forth. We could argue all that. He cannot argue my own personal testimony.
Nope.
Nobody can argue your experience.
That's true.
Right? Everybody can refute scripture. I mean, let's be honest, there are places like in this one passage, was there 2 men or were there 1? Right? Because in one account, in Matthew's account, there were 2 men that were demon possessed. In Mark's, we only hear of 1. I just think, like we said earlier, Matthew's a tax collector. He's going to increase the numbers. That's what he does. But that was my own commentary. But that we can argue. But he cannot argue the change that I know I've had in my life and my experience. And nobody can argue yours, no matter what. So that's why we need to know our story. Not just what we were saved from, but what we're saved for as well. Because Jesus didn't save the man from the demons just from the demons. He saved him for a mission to go and tell the Decapolis, right? Go tell his family.
I've tried to minister with Michael Dawes in that regard.
Good.
And his wife just is amazed. She said, "Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad to know that."
Yeah.
And she was literally in tears.
Because it provides hope and healing in that moment too. And to know that this can be done. And, I talk with Rob Portwood, and he is constant, just like, God may not heal me from this. God's not going to, but he can use me in this. What a perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What a perspective.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's amazing. Just amazing. Any other thoughts? All right. Well, it's 7:39. I'll let you go. How's that? Only 9 minutes late today. So we'll finish up chapter 5 and jump into chapter 6 next week.
Well, now the class is
Yeah, we're still on. I can edit that down though.
11?